Welcome to Vor Navigation, presented by Easternhops FSX. The term VOR stands for Very High Frequency Omnidirectional Range. VORs are ground-based navigational aids. VOR stations are fairly short range. The signals are useful for up to 200 miles depending on altitude, terrain, and the type of station. There are two components to VOR navigation: ground stations and aircraft equipment consisting of a navigation radio and a VOR indicator or omni head. VOR stations send out radio signals in each of the 360 degrees of the compass from the station. These signals, or radials, are oriented to magnetic north. In the image below, the airplane is on the 315-degree radial. There are three types of VOR stations: your standalone VOR, VOR DME, and Vortech. Standalone VORs are depicted on aeronautical charts as a hexagon with a dot in the center. A VOR DME is a VOR combined with distance measuring equipment. It is depicted on aeronautical charts as the VOR symbol inside a square. Our third and final type of VOR is known as a Vortech. A Vortech is a VOR combined with tactical air navigation, or TACAN, which is used by the military. For civilian use, it operates the same as a VOR DME. And it's depicted on charts as the VOR symbol with ears on three sides. Along with the symbol, VORs are depicted on aeronautical charts with a compass rose, as indicated in these two images. In addition to the radial signals, VORs also broadcast a Morse code identifier for the station. This is a series of dots and dashes for the letter identifier of the station. This allows you to know that you have the correct station tuned into your navigation radio. The information box on aeronautical charts for the VOR contains the letter identifier, Morse code identifier, the station frequency, TACAN channel if the station is a Vortech, and H in the upper right corner if it's a high altitude VOR, and the name of the flight service station that serves the area. VORs operate on VHF frequencies from 108 to 117.95 MHz. These frequencies are tuned in on your navigation radio for the station that you want. Navigation radios, or nav radios, vary from aircraft to aircraft. They may be a standalone radio, such as in commercial jets, combined with a communications radio or COM radio to form a NavCom, combined with a COM radio and GPS unit, NavCom GPS, or as part of an integrated flight deck such as the Garmin G1000. The other piece of aircraft equipment that's necessary for VOR navigation is a VOR indicator or omni head. As with the nav radio, they vary from aircraft to aircraft. The first VOR indicator or Omni head we're going to discuss is your standard Omni head. There's nothing extra. It's comprised of several parts, including this numbered ring on the outside. This is your azimuth ring. This is the ring that tells you what radial you're on. The Omni bearing selector or OBS knob at the lower left is used to turn that azimuth ring to select the radial you want to fly. Course deviation indicator is this needle in the center of the gauge here, and that represents the radial that you select. This window right here with the barber pole in it lets you know that this instrument currently is not receiving navigational data from the station. If you tune the radio to the correct frequency, that barber pole will be replaced by one of two arrows. This arrow that's pointing back to you means that you are from the station. And if the course deviation indicator or CDI needle here in the center is centered, that lets you know that you're on about the 027 degree radial. That means your bearing from the station is 027 degrees, or roughly north-northeast. If you wanted to fly directly to the station, you would want to select the reciprocal radial or the one you're on, or the radial that's directly on the other side of the station. So that would be about the 207 degree radial. So you would use your Omni bearing selector to rotate your azimuth ring around to 207 degrees. You notice the CDI is centered once again, and your indicator arrow here is pointing to the station. So if you fly a course of 207 degrees, keeping this needle centered, then you would fly directly to the station. Now these deviation pips down here at the bottom, these little dots, represent 2 degrees off course for each dot. Since the CDI represents the radial and it's to the right of you, that means that the radial you selected is to the right of you. You are left of course, so you need to fly to the right to get back on the radial. Full deflection is 10 degrees since there are 5 pips and each represent 2 degrees. Since the deviation dots right here are measured in degrees rather than distance, your distance off course is going to vary depending on how far away you are from the station. The further away you are from the station, the farther distance you are at a given degree. So 2 degrees close to the station may only be a few hundred feet, but you get out 30 or 40 miles, your distance away from the course line here or the radial may be several miles. Another important note here, you need to know where you are in relation to the station and make sure that you're flying in the correct direction. If you were flying a course of 027 degrees rather than toward the station, you're flying away from it. The CDI is going to act in reverse. As it shows here, you're somewhat left of the radial, when in actuality, if you're flying away from the station, you're actually going to be right of the radial, and this will show the exact opposite. That's about all now for the standard Omni head. We're going to move on to the next type of VOR indicator. The next indicator we're going to discuss is a VOR Glideslope Indicator. It's the same as a standard Omni head, only it has an additional course deviation indicator which runs horizontally on the instrument. This is for glide slope indication for ILS approaches. Right here where you see GS, that is the indicator to let you know that it's picking up the glide slope signal. If you see the barber pole in that window, then you are not picking up a glide slope indication. The to and from indicators are at the bottom of the instrument. Right here where it says nav, right now it's showing from. And the course deviation pips are in the center of the instrument. It works the same as a standard Omni head. You use the Omni bearing selector to choose your radial when you use it in VOR mode. For glide slope mode, it is not necessary to have your course set as the runway heading. It doesn't matter. It'll line up regardless because an ILS only sends out a single directional signal. The third VOR indicator I'm going to talk about is actually a combination instrument. This is a horizontal situation indicator, or HSI. And what it does is it combines a VOR Omni head with the directional gyro. It has this ring around here, but this ring is not your azimuth ring. What this is your directional gyro and will turn as the aircraft turns. Your course deviation indicator is also how you select the radial you want. By turning the OBS knob, what you're doing is turning that arrow. This other knob over on the right hand side works with your directional gyro. This is your heading bug knob to move your heading bug. Rather than having a window with a barber pole in it to let you know that you're not receiving navigation data to this instrument, you have this red nav flag that pops up. Once you start picking up the nav signal, that flag will disappear. Just like so. Like I said, you take the Omni bearing selector to turn the whole arrow, and if you notice, the center of the arrow is actually your course deviation indicator. So once you find the radial to where the arrow lines up, that's the radial that you are on. You also have a to and from indicator like you do in a standard Omni head, and you also have the deviation pips across the center here. Again, they are 2-degree increments when in VOR mode. When using this instrument for an ILS approach, you do have a glide slope indicator, which is a needle that comes down the sides, actually on both sides here, to let you know whether or not you're on the glide slope. Unlike the VOR glide slope indicator, this instrument here, you really do need to set the CDI to the course heading of the runway. Otherwise, you're going to end up flying an ILS approach with your needle looking something like that, all cockeyed, and it's going to confuse you. So you really do need to turn it toward the runway heading when you make ILS approaches. The final VOR indicator I'm going to discuss is glass cockpits, or EFIS tubes, electronic flight instrument systems. This one is from the Boeing 747, which is the aircraft I fly most often. I have it right now in full compass rose view, and this is the way I prefer to fly it. You can also flip to the expanded view. And again, you have the course deviation indicator, and you have the Omni that you can set. But to do it in the 747, you simply go up here and click on the screen. Back in full mode, again, you click on the screen to select the course and to find the radial that you're on. We're actually, again, we're on the 027 degree radial, and heading to the station would be about 207. The nice thing about these panels is because they're electronic, they allow you to have more than one. The purple one is nav 1. The green arrow here actually represents nav 2, so you have the second Omni head on here. And the blue one is an ADF needle. If you have an NDB tuned into your ADF radio and you're picking up the signal, then this blue arrow would point to that station. The nav2, there's no way to select the Omni bearing for nav2, so all this arrow does is point to VOR2 if you have a VOR tuned in. We talked about the Morse code identifiers for VORs. The nice thing about these two is they automatically interpret the Morse code signal and give you the letter identifier for the station. It also gives you the frequency of the station that's tuned in, and also if it's equipped with DME, it'll give you the distance from the station. Now that I've explained both the VOR stations and the aircraft equipment in order to do VOR navigation, let's go flying and see how it works in the real world.